2 weeks. That's what you told the contractor. That's what you told your partner. That's what you told yourself. You are now 17 weeks in. The tile guy is a different tile guy. The cat has learned to live around the sawhorse. Your definition of done has been quietly renegotiated 3 times. You are not stupid. You are not unusually disorganized. You are running a standard, factory-installed subroutine that ships with every human brain. The subroutine has a name. Daniel Kahneman, K.H. Neyman, and Amos Tversky gave it one in 1979. They called it the planning fallacy. And, fair warning, by the end of this video, you will have made it again without noticing. In 1979, Kahneman and Tversky published a short, odd paper called Intuitive Prediction, Biases and Corrective Procedures. It was in a management science journal almost nobody reads. The core claim was deceptively small. People predicting how long their own projects will take systematically underestimate, not sometimes, not when rushed, systematically. 15 years later, 3 Canadian psychologists, Roger Buehler, B.I. Euler, Dale Griffin, and Michael Ross, turned the hunch into data. They recruited 37 psychology undergraduates writing honors theses. Each student was asked 3 questions. When do you think you will finish? If everything goes as well as it possibly could, when? If everything goes as poorly as it possibly could, when? The students then went away and finished their theses at whatever pace their real lives allowed. Here is what came back. The average realistic prediction was 34 days. The average actual completion was 55 days. Even students who tried to imagine the worst possible scenario came in, on average, 7 days early compared to the real future. Fewer than half finished within their own worst-case estimate. The paper, Exploring the Planning Fallacy, 1994, became one of the most cited in the field. The finding was not a flattering one. Here is the misfire in one diagram. When you sit down to estimate how long something will take, your brain does something elegant and completely wrong. It imagines the task. It pictures the first step, then the second, then the handover, then the thing being done. The simulation is vivid, sequential, and internally coherent. Each step looks tractable. The total feels bounded. You hand over a number. The number is almost always too small. Kahneman and another economist, Dan Lovallo, gave the mechanism a name in 1993, the inside view. When the brain plans from inside a task, it models a specific, idealized path from here to finish. Smooth motor function, working internet, a contractor who shows up, no illness, no supplier delays, no discovery halfway through that the wall behind the tile is not actually a wall. The opposite, they argued, is the outside view. Instead of modeling this project, you ask how long similar projects, in general, actually took. You look at the distribution. You steal the mean. Almost no one does this by default. Here is the quiet part. The brain has the data. You remember that the last renovation ran over. You remember that the last thesis ran over. You have 10 years of being late to every meeting at 3. But at the moment of prediction, that data doesn't feel like it belongs to this task. This task is special. This time, you will start early. This time, nothing will surprise you. An old, useful rule, trust your own detailed simulation, fires on a system the rule was never built to handle. Namely, the future. That is the misfire. Here is where the story gets unusual. A lot of behavioral economics has had a painful decade. Loved findings shrank. Some vanished. The IKEA effect, you might have seen the last episode, dropped from a Cohen's d of about 0.85 in the original Norton paper to roughly 0.45 in the pre-registered 2017 replication. The planning fallacy did not do that. It is one of the most reliably reproduced biases in social psychology for 2 reasons. First, the lab replications. Buehler, Griffin, and Ross ran this paradigm again with tax returns, Christmas shopping, home improvement projects, professional workplaces. Other groups ran it in Japan, in Germany, in South Korea, in Brazil. A 2007 meta-analysis by Michael Roy and Nicholas Christenfeld aggregated across dozens of studies and landed on an average actual to predicted ratio of 1.40. Real tasks, on average, take 40% longer than the people doing them said they would. Effect size, roughly a Cohen's d of 0.65. Second, and this is the part laboratories can't fake, the external world provides its own replication. Every public infrastructure project comes with a planned budget and a planned completion date. Every single one. Those plans are, by law, archived. Bent Flyvbjerg, a Danish economist at Oxford, has spent 2 decades pulling those archives. His core database now covers over 16,000 megaprojects. Across transport, energy, dams, and IT, the average cost overrun runs between 28 and 60%. The average schedule overrun sits around 40%. 86% of projects overrun. The extreme cases read like parables. The Sydney Opera House, planned in 1957 for a budget of $7 million Australian dollars, scheduled to open in 1963. It opened in 1973. Final cost, $102 million. 14 times over budget, 10 years late. The Scottish Parliament, planned at £40 million, finished at $414 million. The Boston Big Dig, planned at $2.6 billion, finished near 15. California's high-speed rail, currently running 4 times its original estimate and still unfinished. The direction of the bias is confirmed. The magnitude is catastrophic. The boundary conditions are narrow. The effect weakens for very short tasks. Anything under an hour sometimes gets overestimated. It weakens in collectivist cultures. Buehler's 2003 Japan versus Canada study found Japanese participants underestimated by about half as much. And awareness, being told about the planning fallacy before you estimate, reduces the gap by roughly 10 to 15%, not more. The misfire is real. The misfire is robust. The misfire does not care that you read about it. Learning about the planning fallacy does not make it stop. Daniel Kahneman knew. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, published in 2011, Chapter 23 is explicitly titled The Outside View. The book itself was originally planned for 2 years. It took 14. Awareness is a weak debiasing tool. What actually moves the number is changing the structure of the prediction, not the mind making it. One evidence-based move from Flyvbjerg and Lovallo, reference class forecasting. Before estimating this project, build a reference class, similar past projects, and look at the distribution of actual completion times and costs. Your new estimate becomes the mean of that distribution, adjusted slightly for what's unique here. Done well, this method has reduced overruns on public projects by roughly 30%. A second move from Gary Klein, the pre-mortem. Before starting, imagine it is 1 year later and the project has failed. Write the post-mortem. Why did it fail? The brain is dramatically better at generating plausible failure reasons in past tense than in future tense. You get a more honest risk map in about 10 minutes. A third move is simpler and less fun. Keep a time log, not a memory of past times, the times themselves. Next time you estimate, anchor on your actual completed task log, not your remembered one. They are different. Your memory systematically shortens past tasks, the way the planning brain systematically shortens future ones. A log disagrees, usefully. None of this is plan better. All of it is stop planning from inside the job. The planning fallacy is not an isolated glitch. It is a specific example of a wider pattern. The brain preferring its own vivid, internally generated simulation over external, boring, statistical data. The anchoring effect, Episode 3, the brain grabs the first number and pivots everything off it, even when the number is irrelevant. The availability heuristic, Episode 4, the brain estimates how common by asking how easy to bring to mind instead of looking at base rates. The ostrich effect, Episode 7, the brain ignores its own prior warning signals. The IKEA effect, last week, the brain prices its own effort into the object. Every one of those is the same hardware choice. Favor the live internal signal. Discount the external record. Kahneman would put this in his familiar two-system frame. System 1 runs the simulation. System 2 has access to the archive. But System 2 is expensive to run, and the answer from System 1 already feels complete. So System 2 almost never gets called. The hardware was shaped when the relevant future was the next hour in the same savanna. It was not shaped to estimate when the kitchen would be done. The cleanest open question in the literature is not whether the planning fallacy replicates. It does. The question is whether you can install the outside view as a durable habit, or whether it decays. Short-term interventions work. Participants who are trained in reference class forecasting or who complete a pre-mortem produce significantly more accurate estimates in the next hour, the next day, the next week. The short-term effect is robust. What nobody has cleanly shown is what happens at 6 months, a year, 2 years. Does the habit stick? Does it decay back to the inside view once attention is elsewhere? Or does it require continuous structural scaffolding, a checklist, a team member whose job it is to ask, to survive at all? There is no published longitudinal study that tracks de-biasing persistence for planning specifically. A few adjacent studies in medicine, in forecasting tournaments, suggest decay happens within weeks unless structure holds it in place. Fleabjerg's own bet is that individual training is temporary. Only institutional changes, a rule that every project must submit a reference class forecast before approval, reliably move the number across time. We do not yet know who is right. Look back at the renovation. 2 weeks became 17. The brain did not miscalculate. It calculated correctly, from inside a universe where nothing goes wrong, in a life where something always does. That is the misfire. One last thing, because this episode is honest. Right now, while watching this, you have made at least one small plan: when you'll go to sleep, when you'll get back to the thing you were doing, how long the next task will take. Your brain, in the last 10 minutes, has quietly produced a number. That number is almost certainly too small. You now know about the planning fallacy. In roughly 72 hours, you will make it again. Nothing in this video will have changed that. What can change is whether the next important estimate gets written down by you alone, inside your head, or whether it runs through a reference class, a pre-mortem, a time log, or a colleague who owes you nothing. Next episode, the same brain predicts its own future feelings and gets those wrong in a shape that is weirder and worse. Subscribe if the rest of the pattern matters.